set up for communication. And I walked out of the building, which was a house, had been a private home for some certain family. But that's where we set up our communication. And I saw this car, and I asked one of the other guys, whose car is that? And he knew that it was from your car, and it had 4 inches thick window glass.
Bulletproof.
Yeah.
Hermann Goring was
and lead in the doors itself, so that somebody tried to kill him, it made it pretty difficult.
One thing about Hermann Goring, he was a great big large man. I mean, really big. And he had an ego that was even bigger, because Goring didn't just wear the regular uniforms that the Nazis were supplied, or the regular generals' uniforms, which were very colorful. Goring liked to design his own uniforms, and he had sometimes really outlandish light blue uniforms with a lot of decorations, and sometimes a white uniform. He was later tried in the Nuremberg trials because Goring was one of the few who was there when Hitler started to design what he called the final option, gassing what ended up being more than 6 million Jews. So Goring was a part of that plan from the beginning, and he was, toward the end of the war, he was Hitler's right-hand man. He was tried in Nuremberg, right, Dad?
Yeah.
And in prison, instead of awaiting his execution, which would have been to be hung, Goring committed suicide, I believe with cyanide, a tablet. But that was his staff car, bulletproof
Yes.
staff car.
Yes, now let me tell you something else. I have learned after many years that that car is in eastern North Carolina, and I want to go the next time they put it in the paper that they can have a meeting of particular vehicles.
Dad, while you were serving in Germany, you visited large cities like Dresden, which was absolutely destroyed in the bombings.
Yes.
The fires were so great in Dresden, over 100,000 people died. The fires from the bombings in Dresden were so great that they started to suck all the oxygen out of the air, and they increased in size and became what they call a firestorm, almost a hurricane of fire. So that most of the people that died in Dresden didn't die of the explosive blast, but died of suffocation. The air, the oxygen was just sucked out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But while you were in Germany, you also went to the east after the war. So I don't know if you students know, but after the war, Germany was divided between Russia, America, France, and England. The western half of Germany was controlled in those 3 sections of American, British, and French control, and the whole eastern side of Germany was controlled by Russians. And not a barrier, but a border was set up and guards were set up so that it was illegal for you to go into Russian Germany. Can you talk about how you broke the law with some friends and drove in?
Yeah. Well, yeah. let me say that when I was in Hempstead, Germany, when I saw this car, and we had arrangements made that this one family would cook the food that we had gone to Berlin to get all of the food to be cooked for us. We drove our truck and brought all of this stuff back. But the first time when I went on this trip, which pretty soon came to the Russian controlled area of the highway into Berlin. And one guy who had already been on this trip told us, watch, when you get into the Russian zone control area, you're gonna see out in the ditches along the highway, they'll start getting up and waving us down.
The Russian soldiers?
Yeah, the Russian soldiers.
Were they armed?
Yeah. And so anyway, when we got pretty close, they were really waving their rifles. And but my friend said, now, take off, gun the truck, get on out, get on out. And we heard gunshots from the back of us. But anyway, we went on, and then on our way back, we saw the same men, and we stopped. And I had a carton of cigarettes. I think were Lucky Strikes. And they had different things they wanted us to buy. And but anyway, I saw this camera, and Sci-Fi was the name of the camera, and I gave him 5 packs of cigarettes for that camera, and I had that camera myself at home.
So you bribed the guard to get back across into your section, but you think he was either firing in the air or firing at you when you gunned your truck and broke through the line?
I think, it's really firing.
Dan, there are a couple of pictures up that I just kind of want to scroll through if we can, just a couple, and then we'll talk a little bit about East Germany in 1978. So this is you in your uniform in Germany, if we can keep going. And you served in Western Germany, you set up radio stations. Let's go to the next. Right here, you took a boat tour of the Rhine, and not to really dwell on that, but that's you on the boat, if we could go to the next.
Yeah.
And then was this, or were you on the ship here heading back from Germany back to America?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And go on. There was coal there too.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And this was on the ship, and on our way back. But I got on the ship in what's the city in northern Germany?
Oh, well, Hamburg is on the port, and
Yeah.
Bremen is on the
Bremerhaven.
Bremerhaven, okay.
Yeah, that's right. Got on the ship to come home, but when we left and got down in the English Channel,
There.
something broke about the engine. And anyway, so we then had to turn around, go back up to Bremerhaven, and get on another ship.
Dad, here you are. Your ship is going. This is the English Channel, students. In the far distant, do you see landmass? Do you see land?
Yeah.
That's what nation is that you're looking at, Dad?
England.
Those cliffs.
White cliffs of Dover.
When you read about England, you'll hear these cliffs on the channel are white and chalky.
Right.
So you're passing those.
Yeah.
Dad,
That's right.
one other thing. Tell the students about the hat you're wearing.
Oh. Yeah. What is it?
Flight of Honor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so here a couple of years ago, I was along with a lot of other soldiers from North Carolina were flown to Washington, D.C. to observe the crossing.
You went to the new World War II memorial.
Yeah.
Well, Dad's generation fought in the war and then served in the occupation army after the war. I want to tell you a little bit of story about what Germany was like, 30 years ago and then back to the 40s. How many of you know that we heard us talk about Germany being divided into two parts, Eastern Germany and Western Germany? Raise your hands. Okay, so after the war, Germany was divided in two. The western part of Germany was free, democratic. The eastern part of Germany was communist regime. It was not free. So here's the east. Germany doesn't look like a circle. Here's the west. And inside East Germany is Berlin. Berlin is really right about here in East Germany. Berlin, the city, was also divided in two. East Germany, or East Berlin, was controlled by communists. It was controlled by Russia, really. The western part of Berlin was free. People that lived in Western Berlin were free, but they were inside a totalitarian dictatorship, East Germany. They had to travel a straight road to get into West Germany. My trip took me into East Germany, but also into East Berlin. And so I want to just kind of, if we could go to the next shot, let me tell you a little bit about, keep going on. I'll tell you when to stop. This is what is still called the Reichstag. Who wants to say Reichstag with me? Reichstag. The German word, the Capitol building. Our Capitol building is in Washington, D.C. That's the Reichstag. That was where Hitler and others had their headquarters. And if you look at it, this picture was taken in 1978. Do you see the bullet holes on the columns? When the Russians came into Berlin, they decimated the town and they shot up every building they could find, including the Capitol building. Can you go to the next one? This is another picture of looking from East Berlin into everything past this gate, that building. That looks into East Berlin, communist East Berlin, which was controlled. People couldn't escape from East Berlin. They were held there. If you go to the next image. Okay, this is West Berlin, West Germany, West Berlin. Free, that's a church. Do you notice something funny about the church steeple? It's gone. It was bombed out. That steeple was bombed out in the war, and they kept the building that way so they could remember the war. And Dad, you visited that steeple in 1946. Let's go to the next one. And the next one. So my trip was into East Berlin and East Germany in 1978. It was still a communist state. A wall had been built in East and West Berlin to separate the two halves of the city. The wall was built in 1961. Who's heard of the Berlin Wall? Right. So the Berlin Wall cut the city of Berlin into two halves. And if East Berliners, who were controlled by a communist nation, if they wanted to be free, if they tried to jump over that wall or crawl over the wall, what would happen? Shot and killed. I've got some images later of some grave markers at the wall. I traveled into East Berlin in 1978. I didn't take any pictures of the wall though because it was illegal. So I was on a large bus. We sat at a part of the wall that would let us into East Berlin, and the passageway was called Checkpoint Charlie. Checkpoint Charlie was how you entered into East Berlin. I spent 2 or 3 days in East Berlin, and while I was staying, I went to the tomb of the German unknown soldier. The tomb of the German unknown soldier was guarded by East Berlin, East German communist soldiers. So if you look here, you see this is the changing of the guard at the tomb. 3 East German communist soldiers are marching to change the guard. Now in the 1970s, East German, the government was our enemy. Russia was our enemy. And you've heard about the Cold War and everyone afraid of nuclear exchange. It was real. So if you go to the next, there was an image of the changing of the guard. Here the guards are changing, and they'll swap off on occasion, guarding this large column building which held the tomb of the unknown German soldier. Thought their helmets were very unusual. We go to the next one, just another shot. Now, they're not marching like we march. Do you notice something interesting about their legs? They're stiff. There's a march called a goose step, and that's what they're doing. They're goose stepping. During the Second World War and before, Hitler's Nazi army goose stepped sometimes when they marched. So that goose stepping, it reminds me of a country that's not free. Let's go to the next picture. There's just an image of them goose stepping. Can we go to the next? I'm going to leave it there for a bit. Let me just tell you a little bit about what it was like going into East Berlin. You had to go through a place called Checkpoint Charlie. And when you went through this checkpoint, you know what? Let's skip on. I have some pictures of Checkpoint Charlie. Go to the next. So what you see here is Berlin divided by the wall on this side, and this is New Berlin. So here is the Brandenburg Gate, and here it is now. The wall is gone in this picture, but you can see the wall in this picture. To get into East Berlin, you had to go through one of these walls. Let's go to the next. Another picture of the wall separating East and West Berlin. To the next. Go. Okay, this is Checkpoint Charlie. It doesn't look like much, but your bus went through this American gate. Soldiers checked you out, and then you stopped here. See this tower? So armed soldiers with machine guns and guns were pointed at us, and we sat at that gate for about an hour. I think they were just intimidating us. So while they had guns trained on us, soldiers, armed soldiers came onto our bus, checked us out. If we had anything illegal with us, we'd go to prison. For instance, some people tried to buy East German money and bring it into East Germany and kind of make a killing that way. To check us out, they came onto the bus, armed, pistols, rifles, but then they also had German Shepherd guard dogs that sniffed the bus that we were on. And the most unusual thing they did is they had long poles with mirrors attached to the ends of them. And they would run the poles underneath every car and every bus that went through Checkpoint Charlie. What do you think they were looking for? Well, you know, that's a good guess, but actually what they were looking for were people. People were so desperate to get out of East Berlin that they would strap themselves underneath cars. They would look into cars for secret panels where people would hide inside cars to get out. They wanted to be out so desperately. Well, we sat there at Checkpoint Charlie and waited for about an hour while they checked our vehicle out. The wall, you've seen it, was large, about as tall as this room, and drab and gray. On the western side, people were free. And so people would go to the wall and they would spray colorful graffiti on the wall. But if you were on the east, if you even went close to the wall, you would get shot. Can we go to the next image? This is what Checkpoint Charlie looks like now. The wall is down, and there's just that little building left so people can look at it. When I was in Germany, a lot of East Germans were wishing that they wouldn't take the whole wall down, that they would leave some of the wall. You know why? They wanted younger people to remember that there was this wall that a dictatorial government built up and then told their people that wall is there to protect you from all the people that would invade from the west. But that's all that's left of Checkpoint Charlie. Can you go to the next one? This is another picture of Checkpoint Charlie, the tower. You're on West Germany looking in, and if you look at the buildings behind that wall and see how drab they are, they look damaged. East Berlin, 20, 30 years after the war, still look bombed out. Can you go to the next one? This is just an image of a soldier at the wall. So I want to teach you a word. So this DDR, okay? That's the name of the East German government. Deutsche for D, Deutsche meaning German, Demokratisch for democratic, Republic. The German, East German name of their nation, they call it the Deutsche Demokratische Republik. You want to say that with me? Deutsche Demokratisch Republik. The Germans said, the East Germans who hated being in prison said, es ist nicht Deutsche, es ist nicht demokratisch, es ist nicht Republik. It is not German, it is not democratic, it is not a republic. When I was visiting in East Berlin, I also had a friend in East Germany, and he and I talked about what it was like to be in East Germany. I visited there again after the wall went down. My friend who lived in East Berlin said there is something called the East Berlin look. I want to teach that to you. So look at me, guys, over there. There you go. So here's the East Berlin look. You got to do this. You look left, so look left. You look right, and then you can talk. The East Berlin look. You look left, you look right, and then you can talk. Meaning, East Germans were afraid of the Secret Service and the guards who were always listening to them and always watching them. Their secret police had a name. The secret police were called Stasi. Say Stasi. Stasi. These were the East German police. They were constantly rounding people up, imprisoning them, interrogating. After the wall went down, and it went down in 1989, I went back to East Germany and visited again, and I talked to students in East Germany who told me that in 1989, when the wall went down, people rose up and started rebelling against the East German government that was holding them down. These students I talked to said they rushed into a headquarters, the Stasi headquarters, the secret police headquarters in their town, and they raided the headquarters and took all the paperwork out. So Dad was there right after the war when Germany was bombed out, and I visited during the Cold War when a wall separated people from one another. When I was there looking at that wall, do you know what I thought? I thought I was so glad that I lived in a country that didn't believe in building walls to separate people. I was glad that I wasn't in a place like East Berlin. And I hope I said our country never builds walls. See these crosses right here? These are crosses at the Berlin Wall, and they are one cross for every person who tried to cross the wall and who was shot dead. I want to leave you with that image, and Dad and I want to thank you for having us here to talk with you. And if you have any questions, if you have any time, we're glad to answer.
What was your worst experience?
What was your worst experience, Dan? You want to know what your worst experience was?
My worst experience was coming into the area where the Jews were being slaughtered. And my brother, who passed from when the war ended, he was in Czechoslovakia. And when he came past the concentration camp, he saw all the just how high the big Jews, and many of them had been cast in a deep pit, and just to witness this kind of slaughter. But at the same time, I'm sure my brother Paul was glad to have been a part of it in a chaotic destruction of life, and how Jews after that could take their rightful place back into society.
We give him a round of applause, guys.